Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV's weekly production documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in our time. I'm Alaina Pinto. On the screen is the QR code that will take you to our app, PCMTV. There you will find this program before we even live stream it out to the world on Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So go to the App Store or Google Play and get it today. This past Thursday, a bipartisan group of congressmen introduced the States Act for a third time. The strengthening of the 10th Amendment through the Entrusting States Act was introduced to the 116th Congress in 2019, then reintroduced in the 118th Congress in December of 2023. Now, in the 119th Congress, Republican Congressman Joyce joined with his fellow GOP rep Max Miller and Democrat Dina Titus to put forth a bill that would legalize cannabis and set up a regulatory body that would report to the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax, and Trade Bureau that would work in conjunction with the FDA to come up with guidelines that completely descheduled cannabis away from the CSA. Since this title of the bill is the States Act, part of this legalization allows each state to set up their own regulations, like 24 of the existing adult use legal states right now. Furthermore, it will classify cannabis products into specific categories such as drug, food, dietary supplements, cosmetics, and set standards for contaminants testing, manufacturing, and marketing practices. Joyce released this statement about his new bill. Whether a state is pro-legalization or anti-legalization, we can all agree that the current federal approach to cannabis policy is not working. As President Trump has acknowledged, the existing policy has caused unnecessary harm and squandered taxpayer dollars by diverting law enforcement resources from combating violent crimes to making needless arrests and facilitating incarcerations for small possessions of state legal marijuana. Joyce is also co-chair of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, and he goes on to say, the state's 2.0 Act remedies this issue by bridging the gap between federal and state policy to create a more logical approach to cannabis regulation that allows each state to put the policies in place that work best for their communities and unique needs. Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts introduced the first States Act in 2016, and it will be interesting to see how the Democrats in both houses of Congress react to this now with the Republicans in control. With an analysis of its chances to pass in its current form or with other amendments, here's Andrew Behringer in Washington, D.C.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Last week in Washington, D.C., a bipartisan group of lawmakers has reintroduced legislation that could significantly change federal cannabis policy across the country. The bill aims to respect states' rights while creating basic federal guidelines. Both Republican and Democratic lawmakers joined forces to reintroduce the States Act, or States 2.0 Act. The bill's key sponsors include Ohio Republicans Dave Joyce and Max Miller, along with Nevada Democrat Dina Titus. Joyce and Titus both serve as co-chairs of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus. This legislation would fundamentally change how federal law interacts with the state cannabis programs. Currently, cannabis remains federally illegal, even in states that have legalized it. This bill would amend the Controlled Substance Act to protect individuals and businesses operating legal under state or tribal laws from federal prosecution. Additionally, the bill would legalize interstate cannabis commerce, normalize tax policy for cannabis businesses, and establish a regulatory framework overseen by the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. The legislation comes at a time when public support for cannabis reform continues to grow. A recent GOP poll shows that even a majority of Republicans now favor cannabis reform, particularly policies that allow states to set their own cannabis laws without federal interference. Despite President Trump's previous expressions of support for a states' rights approach to cannabis, the White House officials recently indicated no immediate action is planned on cannabis reform or rescheduling. Former DEA and HHS officials suggest that without the president's active advocacy, comprehensive cannabis reform would face prolonged delays. If passed, the Attorney General would have 180 days to update federal drug regulations, while the Government Accountability Office would conduct research on how legalization affects traffic safety. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer reporting.
So, is anyone a little anxious about what is going on in Washington, D.C. under President Trump? Stock market reacts to every word that comes out of his mouth. And if you are a foreign national or citizen, you are probably worried about the new immigration policy and if you will be targeted. So, as you might expect, Americans who are anxious tend to consume more cannabis to combat that anxiety. Kara Whitstock is a writer with greenstate.com, and her headline sums up her story this week. It caught the eye of our executive producer, Jimmy Young, and he talked with Kara about the results of the Harris poll funded by the Royal Queen Seeds Company. Here they are.
Thanks, Alaina. We have a very special person joining us here on Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week. It's Kara Whitstock, a writer for greenstate.com. And this week, she wrote an article for greenstate.com that the headline caught my eye, okay? Because the headline was The Unexpected Impact Trump is Having on Weed. Kara joins us now. And Kara, explain to me how you came upon this survey that you talked about.
The survey was sent to me by Royal Queen Seeds, so it was a classic combination of brands and journalists, but it wasn't actually focused on this tidbit that we shared. It was focused on consumer trust in products. They want to grow their own weed because they don't really trust that which is on sale right now at stores for being clean from pesticides and whatnot. And then at the very end, they shared that they asked one question if they are consuming more cannabis now that Trump is in office. And that is what most of us journalists grabbed onto because it's a very livable moment. And the answer was yes. Unfortunately, I asked and there were no backup questions because this was just a one-off added on to the main probe, which was growing cannabis trust and consumer trust. And I want to know more. So I'm hoping that they take our interest to heart and they ask some more questions about that on their next run. But essentially, there are more people are turning to cannabis in these last few months. Anxiety is very high and has been since
Right.
the election run started.
That's good.
And that's what the article details.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I did not explain that you have one of your pets on your lap. And we
He
see,
literally left as
okay,
as I
but as soon as
talked.
it was started recording, right? But that was a cattail, just so you know, it's not an appendage that Kara is growing.
No, I'm all human being.
And look, everybody, whether you are in the cannabis side of things or not, is anxious because you just don't know what this guy's going to do. And he's unpredictable and he's
Mhm.
whatever else you want to put in there as well. However, his ego drives him. And I still have faith that when he sees an opportunity to become a hero and feed his ego that, hey, I'm the guy who brought regulatory stability to this industry.
Mhm.
This will, I think, will drive him into getting this thing done or telling his disciples to get it done. And it also coincides with the fact that the States Act is back in Congress again, that this bill
Yeah.
that would allow legalization to happen is now, being talked about in Washington, D.C. So, I'm a hopeful guy, generally positive, right? So I'm
Mhm.
always looking for something that is going to give the industry some kind of hope, something to look forward to. And
Yeah.
I can certainly get your opinion on that, can't I? What I just said?
Yeah, I'm feeling the weight of it and I'm digesting, but I wish I had faith and trust
Hmm.
in acting in the better interest of cannabis. I started working in this industry in 2011 and
Hmm.
I was bright-eyed with, oh, legalization will help everything. And um, as I've watched states favor taxation over patients, taxation over home grows, it does not seem to be that people are concern. So if the administration, and I'm gonna kick myself for saying this, if they can see a glut of money to be had, I think they would act, but at what cost?
Kara, thank you so much for taking a little time out of your Good Friday to join us. And we look forward to more from greenstate.com.
Thank you for having me.
There were some more fireworks out of Washington, D.C. this past week, and they weren't from President Trump. This time, they were by Health and Human Services Director Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has angered the autism community in this country with his harmful remarks. It was at the same news conference where Kennedy announced that he would find a cause for autism in the next 5 months, and he believes it is totally environmental. Then he made these completely hurtful and insensitive remarks when talking about the challenges facing parents of kids on the autism spectrum. He said, "These are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we need to recognize that we are doing this to our children." End quote. Our Michigan correspondent is Amy Carter of the Michigan Wheatsters and the mother of an 18-year-old autistic child. Jaden is his name. Amy is still fighting for the rights of autistic students to use cannabinoid-based medicine delivered by registered nurses at school. She has driven to Jaden's school for years to take him out of school, go 1,000 feet away from school to administer his medicine so he can return without any danger of outbursts and uncontrolled behavior. Needless to say, Amy's experience with Jaden counters everything RFK Jr. said.
My son Jaden has conquered milestones I never imagined possible. I contribute the majority of his success to cannabis. It has helped to improve his IQ and reduce his challenges. Yes. He plays baseball and football, works, and pays taxes. If you're a parent of a child with autism, your life isn't ruined. It can be tough, but I feel blessed. What I've always told Jaden is that he has superpowers, like heightened hearing and incredible memory. It's crucial to recognize that they grow into autistic adults who have unique needs. Critically, the struggles many face stem from the lack of support, not autism itself. Autism requires tailored assistance, and when support is limited, families suffer. It's important not to generalize experiences. Not every autistic child regresses or will struggle with employment. Many adults, including my son, hold jobs and contribute to society. We need to focus on the realities and needs of the autistic community instead of framing them as burdens. There's no cure in sight, but access to support is vital for these children and adults. Now let's work together to advocate for the help they really need.
That's Amy Carter from the Michigan Wheatsters, who, while is one of the driving forces for advocacy in that state, she is most proud of the fact that she is known as Jaden's mom. On Easter Sunday, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has called for RFK Jr. to resign from his position as the Director of Health and Human Services after his hurtful remarks. Kennedy did back off his comments a bit by saying he was only referring to the 25% of autistic children who are nonverbal. No word on whether he will even respond to Senator Warren's request to resign, so stay tuned. The National Institute of Health announced for the formation of a resource center for cannabis and cannabinoid research. Once again, it will be located at the University of Mississippi, where the nation's only legal growing center lived for many years, even during Prohibition. And now, in conjunction with Washington State University and the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, the Resource Center will continue its research work on the many cannabinoids still being discovered in the plant. Of course, that is contingent that their funding doesn't get taken away. But now let's check out what is going on in Arizona with Karen Black, where that state continues to see declining sales. Here's Karen.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Arizona's cannabis industry is facing its second straight year of declining sales, with total revenue dropping from a 2022 high of over $1.4 billion to about $1.26 billion in 2024, an 11% decrease year over year. Medical sales have been hit hardest, plunging nearly 32% last year, while adult use sales dipped by about 4.5%. There is a glimmer of hope. March 2025 sales were up nearly 10% from February. However, they were down the same amount compared to last year. Average item prices have stabilized and total units sold rose to 5.8 million in March, but profit margins remain tight due to high taxes and continued competition from illicit sellers. At the state capitol, 4 cannabis bills remain alive and 2 advanced this week. One about rural opportunity and dual licensees now heads to the House Minority Caucus. The other, which mandates medical marijuana funds be used for clinical research grants, is moving to the House Committee of the Whole. A bill tightening cannabis advertising restrictions awaits Senate action. The fourth, which would allow cannabis tax money to be used interchangeably between 2 funds, is stalled in committee. On a more positive note, Arizona has shortened the required period police recruits must abstain from consuming cannabis before being hired from 2 years to 6 months, further easing past restrictions. Previous lifetime and age-based use limits have also been removed, perhaps reflecting changing attitudes toward cannabis in the state. Different from the typical 420 sales promotions, Giving Tree Dispensary in North Phoenix marked the holiday with 420 acts of kindness, encouraging staff and customers to complete 420 good deeds before April 20th, shifting the holiday's focus from sales to community and compassion. And lastly, Earth Extract and Earth's Healing dominated the Tucson Weekly Cannabis Bowl, winning 4 and 3 awards respectively. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
As we start to do more and more research on the medicinal values of cannabis, it's just a matter of time before a cure or a new treatment for cancer is discovered to combat that horrible disease. Now, Kimmy Cannabis has a story about a research study that might be the first big step coming out of her state of Oklahoma.
I am Kimmy Cannabis from Canna Talk About It with the Oklahoma update for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In the world of cannabis and cancer care, a major milestone is making global headlines. Oklahoma's very own Jamie Bennett, formerly known as RSO Mama, and Jim Garanser of Texas, alongside their incredible team at the Cancer Playbook, powered by Whole Health Oncology Institute, have launched a groundbreaking meta-analysis on medical cannabis outcomes and associations with cancer. And the media response? Massive. In just a few days, the press release has reached an estimated 495 million people as of April 18th. That's right, 495 million. It's been featured on major platforms like Associated Press, Yahoo Finance, Investor Place, and even The Guardian and Politico. Syndicated in over 100 outlets worldwide, from Latin America to France, Italy, and Brazil, and across cannabis medical and financial platforms alike. This research lays foundation for the next evolution. The Playbook Agent, an interactive tool that helps cancer patients get answers about cannabis, symptom relief, and real-world outcomes, all backed by science. The meta-analysis has already outperformed 73% of all articles in Frontiers in Oncology, and it's only been out for a few days. As Jamie and Jim put it best, we're proud of how far we've come and even more excited about what's ahead. This isn't just news, it's a shift in the conversation about cannabis, compassion, and cancer care. Please stay tuned for our upcoming one-on-one interview right here on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. That's it for Oklahoma Update. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
That'll do it for the A block, or first section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In the B block, we go international with our European report. And we'll start our state reports in Illinois with the clone guy, Mark Allen, after those international reports. Coming up next on Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
You are allowed to gift marijuana to people of legal age here in the state of Illinois. And